people are probably wondering like, okay, what do I need to do to get started? To buy a business, right? And most of the time, like, you don't necessarily need a lot of capital. Like, I'll let you talk about it. So,
yeah, you're right. I mean, I hate this, like, I don't ever like the idea of like, you can buy a business with $0 down in 30 days. Like, I don't think that's real. What I do think is real is that it's probably a mixture of simpler than you think it is and a bit harder to execute than you think it is. Like, it's not easy. It is hard work, but it is relatively simple. The problem with buying businesses is that it's complicated. Maybe it's similar to you when you think about talking about marketing. You're like, well, how do you market a company? You're like, this question's so big, I don't even know what to do with it. I think where people start and where I like to get them to start, we have something called the investor operating system, which is basically like, I don't even want you to think about buying a business until you can understand the language of money. Until you understand the terms and the lingo, don't waste your money because you're just going to make mistakes. And once you understand the language of money, which I think takes like, let's say, like, I would think about it like a course, like you need 1/4 of understanding the language of money. And if you've already run a business, you could probably skip that step because you know a lot of it, but maybe not. And then I think you need another 1/4 of how do I do acquisitions? Because where most people get it wrong, they're like, Codie, what's a good business to buy? I'm like, wrong question.
And just to pause for a second too, just what is the language of money? Because I remember you talked about it on another pod. I think it's important for people to understand.
So the language of money is basically this. It's that in finance, we earn our money by getting people to give us their money, and they give us 2% of their profits. 2% of every dollar and 20% of the profits. That's how we make money in private equity. There's no incentive structure for private equity people to explain to the normies, people like you and me, how to execute what they do, because then you don't pay them these exorbitant, very high fees, in my opinion. And so because of that, we might be taught the language of math or accounting, but we're not really taught the language of money and specifically doing deals. And so if you don't understand, we have a list on our website, actually. I think it's like, if you don't understand these words, don't do a deal. And it's all the things that could fuck you up in doing your first deal. And it's all the terms. And it's things like, if you don't actually truly understand EBITDA, net revenue, gross revenue, margin, profit, non-compete, NDA, LOI. If you don't understand these terms, you shouldn't be doing a deal yet. And then that's first layer. First layer is understanding all those terms. I think we listed something like 60, 75 terms loosely we think is necessary. And then the next level is if you don't understand what is good or bad in those terms. So I could say, well, I understand EBITDA. It's interest before earnings, taxation, depreciation, amortization. Okay, great. Now, what does that mean? Like, what is a good EBITDA number? What's a bad one? What's a good EBITDA percentage for a company? So you have to understand the language and then the context, right? Which I think of like filler verbs. So can you fill in like the filler words around the main ones in a language? And then once you've done those two things, then you have to know thyself, which is basically, what do I want? Like somebody today, I was talking to them, they're like, I want to buy a nail salon. I'm like, why? She's like, well, I get my nails done and I want to own a boring business and I like have the salon near me. And I was like, okay. I was like, why do you want to own a nail salon? She's like, you just asked me that question. I'm like, ask it again. And she's like, well, I want to make money. And I'm like, you don't want to own a nail salon then. You want to make money and you just need to figure out what is the highest and best use of the way for you to make money. And so then you got to really understand, what do you want? That's where we get into your deal box. So what is a good or bad deal for you? And then you understand, okay, now I speak the language. I understand the context. I know what I want. Now, how do I find a deal? How do I finance a deal? How do I execute a deal? And how do I run a deal? And once we can do all of those things, you can string them together to buy a business. And it's not really that complex, but it is hard work.